Last week's Ontario Court decision was a moment of reckoning for municipalities in Ontario. The Ontario Superior Court of Justice ruled that clearing an encampment constitutes a violation of the charter rights of the people living there. The court rejected a request by the Region of Waterloo to evict nearly 50 people from a Kitchener encampment. This decision showed that municipalities like Barrie cannot strong arm their vulnerable population into invisibility by dismantling their encampments. This decision follows a similar ruling from the Supreme Court of British Columbia last year. The court decision in Ontario is viewed as a major victory for people who are dealing with homelessness and municipalities that have been disregarding the issue. Barrie has been issuing similar eviction notices in the past and will now be forced to adopt more compassionate approach. To gain insights into the implications of the ruling on homeless populations and expectations from the city and the county, we spoke with Executive Director of the John Howard Society of Simcoe, Muskoka, Hayley Murdoch-Fyke. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you for asking.
No, before we get started, can you provide a little bit background into the recent ruling of the Superior Court of Justice regarding the encampment in Kitchener area?
So the justice ruled in this case that the region was not able to evict the encampment that the community had created. They had access to resources in that area. They knew the area. They had made their own little community, and justice felt that it would not be beneficial to any of the parties involved to displace the encampment. So this is a huge case and excellent outcome for this community. And I think that it'll have rippling effects through other communities across Ontario for sure.
In terms of, can you provide a little bit background into where if you know where the case started and how that got to the court?
So I believe that the municipality of Waterloo, and in the court decision, they call it the region. So they brought the case forward, asking for permission to remove the encampment within Waterloo. And I think it was, or Kitchener, and it was Victoria Street North. And it sounds like it's very centrally located to other, like the shelter and different food access for the community and stuff like that. So it was very centrally located to things that that community needed. And they were able to access different agencies and supplies and stuff like that. But because it was on city land, it wasn't being used for anything, but there is some construction in the future that is going to be happening on there. So they wanted to preemptively move things along, but there was no dates or anything set for the construction. I think it said beginning sometime in 2024. So they have some time. So the justice felt like that was not significant enough to move people along right at this point.
Yeah, and you raised very important couple of important points. And before getting to that, this court ruling is also, we can say, not influenced, but it comes after the British Columbia court ruling in which the courts refused to grant permission to Vancouver municipality to vacate the encampment in that city as well. So do you think the Ontario Court of Justice kind of taking the leaf from British Columbia?
Absolutely. British Columbia always seems to be a bit more of a progressive province with a lot of their court decisions. So I think Ontario is definitely following along on that. And I'm so happy to see that. And I'm hoping that that will continue through other provinces as well, because this isn't just a British Columbia issue or an Ontario issue. Like, this is happening all across Canada.
Yeah, and that's right. And you said that this encampment was, kind of centrally located, and so there they had, access to food and other services. So it also, kind of highlights the importance of having, homelessness, the shelters in the, heart of the city, not, somewhere in the remote areas where, even because they don't have vehicle, they don't have access. So, how do you see it, that point that you just made?
Well, it's very important for access to service for vulnerable communities to be where the community is, right? So in Barrie, it is spread out across the city, but a lot of our homeless vulnerable population is in the downtown core, because that's where all of the agencies are, the social services are. Salvation Army for lunch and dinner and shelter, Busby, our location, they're all centrally located. And when you create an encampment or you have a little community, I know that there's several places around Barrie where people kind of group together and they make a little community somewhere. And we've had this issue too. And I want to just acknowledge that I understand everyone has a job to do. Bylaw has a job, police have a job, all of the agencies, we all have jobs. And sometimes they conflict a little bit with each other. But I think it's important to recognize that they are just doing what they're supposed to be doing from their mandate as well. But when people create a community, they know where the resources are, they know where they can use the bathroom. I know my neighborhood, you know your neighborhood, right? Like, we know where to go and where is safe and where's not safe. And having an encampment area that you're able to put up a structure or a tent or something with a community around you that you trust, because it's usually a couple people grouped together, because just safety in numbers, your stuff doesn't get stolen, nighttime, things are safe, right? So by moving them and displacing them into a different area, because we don't have enough shelter beds, and even if we did, people deserve to have a choice. And I think that that's what this court really recognized, was that people do deserve a choice and to have autonomy. And so people don't go into shelter for a variety of reasons. But even if we had enough shelter beds, people still need to have a choice on where to go and to know where to get food and where is safe and where to go to the bathroom and all of those kinds of things. But when you displace them and say, well, just move along, we don't have another place for you, but move someplace else, it creates a really high safety risk, because they're moving into an area that, even if it's a couple blocks away, they may not know really well, right? And so other groups are living there, and perhaps they don't get along or there's issues, and it just causes a lot of conflict, and creates a really unsafe situation.
We take it for so granted in the neighborhood that we live and that we understand, and we never think that, because they don't have permanent home, so they move from place to place. But ultimately they also want to stick to the area that they know that their friends are, because almost every night I walk by, I go for a walk, and I walk by the the Busby Center, and I always see, I kind of come to recognize them. They are in a group, 2-3 friends. You see they are standing in groups near the center, and I never had any bad experience with them at all. And this is what I even realized, little a segue from for what I was talking about. When even I go for a walk in the downtown, I never had a bad experience, because they also understand, this is what I believe, that they understand that even one reason they give to people, and then police will come marching in, and they will be in trouble. So I noticed that they behave very responsibly, and I have been going in downtown for more than a year for a walk. So this ruling especially comes after during the pandemic, there was encampment in Toronto downtown, and the court refused to, court allowed municipality to vacate them, and the court said that this is because of the summer and things might change. So indirectly the court said that if it was winter, they might have allowed the encampment to stay. So in terms of this ruling is kind of tied to the availability of the spaces in the shelter. So in terms of Barrie and Simcoe County area, do we have enough spaces compared to our homeless population?
No, so we don't have enough beds. The Busby Center has been able to open temporary shelter for the winter, an additional 50 spaces. Even that's not enough. It's great that we got extra beds, but that's still not enough. We do enumeration, so it's a point in time count of how many homeless individuals there are in the area. It's a bit tricky because it's one particular day each year, and you kind of count how many come into your agency and around in the shelters and stuff like that. So you are going to miss people. That's just a fact. But there's also a lot of hidden homelessness. So if one individual has a room or got an apartment or something like that, there might be 6 of his friends who are kind of sleeping on the floor, staying warm, but you don't know, right? But that's not permanent housing for them. Right. So there's a lot of people who are couch surfing or having to stay with families because they lost their houses or, their employment and they can't pay their rent, that kind of thing. So homelessness is a really broad issue, and it affects people in all walks of life. I think a large misconception is that every person who is homeless has some sort of drug addiction or has been in the criminal justice system or something like that. There's a lot of reasons why people can become homeless. And then unfortunately, it tends to draw them into the criminal justice system because if they're setting up tents on city land, then they do get trespass orders and stuff like that, right? So it just kind of drags them into that cycle, but that's not necessarily how they started out.
What implications this ruling can have on the homeless population and the city? Because there is a talk that Kitchener, which is part of municipality of Waterloo, might go to the higher court in order to clear the encampment. But many advocates are suggesting that might be the waste of time, because that this ruling is really on a solid ground. Really ruled into the chartered rights. So in terms of what do you see this going forward, and this issue unraveling forward?
I can see the region trying to appeal this decision. I can. I feel like if they were going to do it, they might wait a little bit and try to appeal so that they were able to evict the encampment in the summer, because that doesn't look as bad, right? It's not as bad PR. I think they'll have a very difficult time getting their appeal. I think this is such a huge mainstream issue now. Everyone is talking about it. And again, because they are following on what British Columbia did, I think that it's a stronger case now. It's not just one court decision. There's been several now. So I'm hopeful that the region's not successful in their appeal. I think that other encampments in other cities will definitely follow along with this. Now that there's some traction, and it's traction in Ontario as well, right? So it's good that British Columbia was successful and that the Ontario court is now following that. But I think it gives, because it's closer to home, it gives regular people more belief that things can happen here as well. So I'm hopeful that more communities try, to be honest.
So we can very much see this in the rule, because during the summer I interviewed a woman, Ash. She goes by Ash Wolf, and she was living in Milligan's Park. She had a small encampment there, and she got various notices, and finally, she was evacuated just before the winter started, and she told me that now she has no other option than going into the hiding. And because she had a partner, she has two dogs, and I don't think we have shelter system that accommodate that, as well as she had he had a family, she had a family, children, so they used to come in and visit. So I don't think we have a system for that as well. So we can very much see encampments coming up in Barrie and Simcoe County area in coming future. So what do you think could happen, and what do you think the local government should handle it?
Well, we definitely have some encampments. They're quite a bit smaller than the one that was in this court ruling, but they are smaller but spaced out, and we do have several. So far, the city and the local police department have really tried to be as cooperative with people as they can. Again, like I recognized earlier, they have a job to do. They have to do these things. I've gone with them a couple of times to encampment evictions, just so that the people that had to move along saw a friendly face. And we made sure that everything kind of went smoothly and everyone was, okay. They're not fun to go on, I can tell you that, because people are packing up their home, right? So it doesn't look like that to maybe general population, right? But how would you feel if someone came to your home and said, okay, so you have 5 minutes, that's all we can give you, 5 minutes, please pack your belongings, I don't know where you're gonna go, can't drive you there, but you need to move, right? Like, there's, even with a small amount of things, 5 minutes is not enough, 10 minutes isn't enough, and it's your home. And during some evictions, if people weren't home, their stuff was just thrown out, right? And so then they came home to no home, right? And that puts a huge strain on agencies and nonprofits who are helping people supply things like tents and blankets, clothing, all of that, because it's just continuously, my tent got taken, it got wherever it went. But as a nonprofit, I don't have funds to buy more tents, but people still need tents and homes, right? So that process, while I understand the city and police have their jobs and they had the things that they needed to do, that's not maybe the best solution. I don't really know what is. This court ruling is excellent, but as a community, I think it would take a serious sit down and looking at the bylaws and how can we all kind of work together on how to do this. And there have been many meetings and people have been trying to talk and communicate about how we can do this better, but there are still ongoing evictions happening, right? So I'll get an email, the other shelters and stuff will get an email, hey, on this street, there's a tent, please go and deal with it, have them move along before law enforcement or by law have to come and do it, right? So now it's kind of turned into agencies pre-warning that people are coming and that you have to move along so you have more time, and we connect people with resources and stuff like that. But again, at the end of the day, there's not enough shelter beds and people don't access shelter for various reasons sometimes. So even if there are beds available, maybe it's not a safe environment. Maybe they have certain conflicts with people that are already there. maybe they have family, right? Like maybe they have pets, they can't bring them there, right? So there's a lot of different issues of why people don't access. And I think the narrative of, well, if you're outside and not in shelter, then you want to be outside, that may not necessarily be true. Maybe they just don't want to access the services that are available at this point in time, right? And that varies from city to city. But maybe those services aren't meeting their needs. And so that's why they're not accessing.
Yeah, so how do you see, because this ruling can, as we discussed, very much uh, prohibit municipalities from evacuating, encampments. So the other solution is, having more shelter, more houses, more space for the, homeless, unhoused people. So how do you see the solution? What do you see needs to be done in the county and the city?
We need supportive housing. So it's not beneficial to most people to just give them a space to live, especially if you've been chronically homeless, to just give you a space and say, okay, well, there you go. And now, you pay rent with your OW check or your ODSP check, and now you have a roof, and, we're going to walk away, and there you go. People are reporting when they get housed after they've been homeless for long periods of time and even short periods, it's a very hard adjustment, right? So people struggle being housed, and that seems a little bit strange to us. But what I'm hearing is that they need more support in that transition from homelessness to being housed, because it obviously is significantly different, right? The experiences in your day to day. People are reporting like it's uncomfortable to sleep in a bed. They sometimes sleep on their floor, right? Because they're not used to it. And it takes, because of the trauma that people experience when they are living on the street, to just stick them in housing and say, well, there you go. It doesn't work. So we need supportive transitional housing, wraparound services, right? Like on-site people to be there. I've had a couple clients who have recently been housed, and they come and they visit the office and they say, oh, like, could you come visit me? I'm really lonely, right? Like no one comes because there are restrictions on who they can have, and they want to protect their housing, obviously. So sometimes you can't have your friends over because that doesn't turn out well, right? So they're losing their community a bit by being housed. And not to say that housing is the issue, right? Like obviously that's not the issue, but it needs to be more supportive, right? So then we go and we visit our clients in their housing, and then it's a sense of community still, right? So I'm hopeful that other encampments, other cities, other areas will take this ruling and try it in their area. I feel like it will be necessary to have a collection of agencies kind of work on the behalf of people as well. I don't think it could be a singular agency that kind of fights it. I think it would have to be a collaborative effort for sure. But I'm sure that there's several people and agencies in Simcoe County who would support this. Yeah.
So you have, recently took the charge of, John Howard Society. So congratulations once again. So in this, your new role, how do you, see this navigating specifically the homelessness issue in light of the recent court ruling?
So our mission is to work with people who are in conflict with the law or at risk of being in conflict with the law. So that really encompasses a lot of different populations of people. But in Barrie, it does involve our homeless community, and we do see them daily. They come into our office for, again, various supports, court support, fingerprints, that kind of thing. Like food, we have a warming space in our very small office during the day. So my long-term goal would be to have supportive transitional housing for people who are exiting provincial incarceration. So when you exit federal, you get to go to a halfway house. Most of the time you go to the halfway house, and then at least you have a landing spot. But when people are going to provincial for a month, 3 months, a year, 2 years, when they get out, they've lost everything, right? So then they end up in the shelter system. They get dropped off downtown Barrie, whether they belong to this area or not, they have supports in this area or not, they get dropped off in Barrie. And then they just kind of fall into the shelter system. And then we see the recidivism continue on. So with our John Howard mandate, that would be my goal and my hope for this agency in particular is to have the transitional housing for provincial.
And a little bit about, you said they often get dropped into into the Simcoe County and Barrie area. So how, like, can you provide just a little bit background, like why does that happen and when did it start?
So the provincial institution for this area is Central North Correctional Center. So it's in Penetanguishene. So the closest main population hub is Barrie. And because of the train station, bus station, people are dropped off here and given bus tickets to wherever they need to go. Whether that bus arrives or it's enough to get you there or wherever it is that you're going, right? Especially with Greyhound now not operating, not being in existence, travel is hard. And if you are arrested in the summer and you are out in the winter, you are out in your clothes that you were arrested in, right? So you're in your flip-flops and your shorts in the dead of winter downtown Barrie. So you meet people, you ask where to go, whatever the situation is, the Salvation Army is right there. Maybe you're hungry, you just got out, right? So then now you're here and maybe you know people or whatever. So you tend to stay. If there's no support or no family that's coming to pick you up outside the doors when you get out, that's where you go. They drop you to Barrie.
Yeah, I remember there was one incident in Cape Breton that a person, who was dropped off after he was released from the jail with no support system, in I think that was in December, Jan, and he I think died the very first night he was out of the jail. So yeah, so I understand, there's a need for definitely, a need for more support system. How can you see we can create more affordable housing options for those feeling homelessness, and as there's budget negotiations are going on, Barrie allocated more than $4 million more for police force, which did not see much opposition from any council members. So what are your expectations from the budget in terms of providing help for the homeless population?
I'm hopeful. I think a good start for our area would be 24-hour warming in the winter. So I currently run the John Howard Society, currently runs the warming center in Barrie. It needs to be -15 or -20 with the wind chill for me to be able to open with our operating budget that we were given by the city and the county. We have a little bit more wiggle room. So we're into February now, and because of the weather conditions that we've had in November and December, they're very cold, but they didn't hit the threshold of when I was able to open. So now I've had a chat with the county the other day, and they've given me more leeway in when I'm able to open, but I still have a very small budget. So it needs to last until the end of March, and who knows what March will look like, or even next week. So I do have to be careful on when I can open so I don't run out of money. As a nonprofit, I have to be very careful about that. But I think for a good start for Barrie would be 24-hour warming in the city for the winter. And starting in November gets very cold. There's rain, there's wind, right? Like a lot of health conditions come from being exposed to all of these elements. We have people in here with trench foot so bad that they leave crying because they're in so much pain, right? And these are all weather, temperature related health issues, right? So I think a good start for Barrie would be that 24-hour warming. And then also more funding. And I know that that's kind of everyone says funding, but it is, as nonprofits, all of our agencies, to run our programs and pay our staff and everything, we need to have the money to be able to do that. I'm sure there's lots of agencies, mine included, who would help do supportive housing, right? Like put people in there, have our services in there. But again, I have a very small team. I think I have a staff of 6 right now, not including the warming center staff because they're temporary. So I need more staff. I need funding to pay for those staff to then be able to deliver additional programs for supportive housing. But that's definitely something that I would do. And I know for sure several other agencies in the area would do it, and we would do it as a team.
Yeah, and so I can't help but, get just a tiny bit into it. So who decides this temperature requirement? Is it decided by the people who are, struggling with homeless, or these are decided by people like us who are sitting in a warm house in winter?
Yes. So I've been asked that question several times by our clients included, because they say, how am I supposed to know what temperature it is and when you're supposed to be open? It's cold. I'm outside 24/7 and it's cold all the time. So the county got their temperature decision from the Ontario Emergency Weather Emergency Response, sends out an alert and says, hey, all of population, it is very cold. These are the safety things that you do because it is so cold. And so that's where they got that from. I think in realizing that it is a bit too cold, because -15 is the temperature we're allowed to open, but it's kind of saying, okay, well, -14, it's fine to stay outside. Well, it's not, right? So I think the county is trying to work on this for sure. I had a great conversation with them the other day, so I'm hopeful that we can start changing this. I mean, last year it used to be -20. Right. So we all the agencies kind of rallied together and said, hey, -20 is definitely way too cold. Let's bump it up. We got it wiggled to -15. So maybe next year we'll wiggle it more.
Yeah, and you said that it's most likely to come from the emergency response. So it seems that it is the temperature where they're seeing person's life may be at risk. So you are not going to get into a warming shelter unless maybe quote unquote you are about to die. So
yeah,
it seems yeah.
That doesn't work. And that's for generally if you are housed and you are going to then go outside and go for a walk around your block or something, that it's too cold and perhaps stay inside, right? Those temperatures don't work for if you live outside and these are your living conditions. It doesn't take into account everyone's individual healthcare issues and things that they struggle with, right? And heating is a significant issue. It's dangerous to try and heat a tent, but tents aren't weatherproof, right? So it's still very cold in there. So people are trying to warm it up, and it's not the safest, right? So that's what me and my agency really worry about. And I know other agencies as well. We worry about everyone, especially when we close our office door. We have warming during the day in our office, and then at 4:30 we say, okay, so sorry, like we'll see you tomorrow, right? Because we may or may not open the warming. We may not know at that point, right? We tell everybody that we can when we know, but then we shut our door, and it's really hard on our staff. And I know shelter staff and everybody, it's really hard on our staff to then go home knowing that our community is outside.
Yeah, and
So,
and in terms of how many, I was just trying to understand the budget in terms of how many spaces you have, and what is the budget, what is the money that you get in winter for warming center.
so we have capacity for overnight warming for 18. Just with fire code in the space, it's always double staffed. So that's 12 hours of staffing. I have to pay rent for the space every night that we're open, food and supplies. So it was enough of a budget to open for 45 nights.
And then
Winter is longer than 45 nights.
and you rent this space only in winter, and then, or you rent this all year round?
So our office is year round, but the warming center is located at the Collier United Church. So it's the big church downtown. So that's where the warming center is located.
City doesn't have unlimited resources, right? So when money is
No.
going to one cause, one services, for example, police, it's not going to go to another services. So if just trying to understand, not $4 million, but you are talking about 24 hour 24/7 warming center in winter, so that might cost $200,000 or $250,000.
I did the math. It's about $350,000 because including rent, staffing, food, supplies, all of that kind of thing. For 6 months.
For 6 months. Okay. So that's what
Five.
5 months. Yeah, that's what I was trying to understand, because this is the budget time. So I was trying to understand, reaching out to people and understanding, what is the budget allocation, and what are their suggestions in terms of allocating that. So that's all I had. Do you have anything else to add? Anything that you wanted to say to the city, to the county, in terms of budget allocation, or anything else?
I appreciate all of the funding that we receive from everywhere that we get it from. So the city, the county, private funders, donations, grants. Like I do really appreciate it. We need some more, and we need sustainability in the funding. And that will boost all of the agencies' issues, because every agency I know is struggling. Every nonprofit agency I know is struggling with this, especially with staffing retention. My staff do 6 jobs each, right? I pay them for 1 job, right? But that's just kind of what it is. We're all so passionate about what we are doing. But to be able to retain staff and support our community in a really meaningful way, we do need money, and we need food and clothing, and we need items to help keep people alive. And our community deserves a choice of what they want and where to go and where they need to access services. And also, I strongly recommend that the county and the city somehow figure out public bathrooms because that's a really big issue for our community. So that would just be my main thing, is I would love to see some public bathrooms available for people.
Yeah, thank you so much, Hayley, again, for your time. And I really appreciate, the work you do, and, taking the time to answer the questions.
Thank you so much for having me. This was good.
We are reaching out to other stakeholders affected by this ruling, and will bring you more coverage around the issue. Thank you for watching.